Take a look at this number, 93. What do you think that is? It's not a sports stat or a stock price. It's the number of people one man confessed to murdering.
So that's what we're digging into today. We're going to unpack the story of Samuel Little. But more than that, we're going to look at the systemic failures that let a monster like him hide, not in the shadows, but right out in plain sight for almost 50 years. And let's be absolutely clear about this. The FBI has confirmed it. Samuel Little is the most prolific serial killer in the history of the United States. Period. His confessions paint a picture that is just horrifying, spanning decades and the entire country.
But that just brings up this huge, kind of chilling question, right? This guy wasn't some ghost. He was constantly getting arrested, constantly interacting with law enforcement. So how on earth did he murder so many people for so long without anyone ever connecting the dots? That's the mystery we're going to unravel.
Well, the first piece of the puzzle is that the guy the cops thought they knew, he wasn't real. His public criminal record was basically a mask, and it hid something way, way more evil.
And when you look at these mugshots, what's really incredible is what you don't see. Police all over the country just saw a drifter, a petty thief, a guy causing some minor trouble. They saw him as a nuisance. They had no idea they were looking at a stone-cold serial killer. And that's the disconnect right there. On paper, on the official record, it's all petty stuff. Theft, assaults, breaking and entering. But the reality, the off-the-record truth, it was a horror show. Murder, strangulation, and a body count that just kept climbing. He was living this terrifying double life, and the system only ever saw the surface.
So for decades, these two worlds, the petty thief and a serial killer, they just never collided. But, technology eventually catches up with everyone, and one single, totally unrelated arrest finally ripped the whole thing open. It all came crashing down in 2012. He gets picked up at a homeless shelter in Kentucky and shipped over to California on a drug charge. But this time was different. This time, they ran his DNA through the national database. And boom, it gets a hit. Not just one, but 3 hits on the unsolved murders of 3 women in LA from way back in the 1980s. By 2014, it was over. He was convicted and sentenced to life without parole. Just like that, the ghost was in a cage. But here's where the story takes another crazy turn. Getting him convicted for those 3 murders, that wasn't the end. Oh no, it was just the beginning of finding out the real truth. Because once he knew he was never ever getting out, Samuel Little started talking. And don't think for a second this was about him feeling guilty. Nope. It was a transaction. He wanted a better prison situation, a transfer out of LA, so he made a deal to cooperate. And with that, the floodgates just burst open. Just look at the scope of this. And you gotta remember, this is just a tiny, tiny fraction of his list. A murder in Florida in 1970, Mississippi in 78, California in the late 80s, Louisiana in the mid-90s. The man was all over the map, a total phantom, leaving a trail of bodies that nobody was connecting. So this brings us back to that big question, how? How did he get away with it? And the real ugly answer, it's not just about him being a drifter or the lack of technology, it's about who he chose to kill. He deliberately went after the most vulnerable people he could find. Sex workers, women struggling with addiction, homeless individuals, people living on the absolute fringes of society. He targeted women he thought nobody would even notice were gone. And this is straight from him, his own twisted logic. He figured these women would leave fewer clues, and even worse, that fewer people would bother looking for them. He found a crack in our society, a blind spot where certain lives were just seen as less valuable, and he turned it into his personal hunting ground. It's just sickening. And we have to remember, these weren't just nameless victims. They were real people. Carol Linda Alford, she was 41 years old. Her murder was a cold case for 25 years before that 2012 DNA match finally gave her family an answer. Audrey Nelson Everett, she was 35. Her case was also solved by that same DNA hit. These women had lives and stories and people who loved them. And for decades, their killer was just another face in a stack of mugshots, while the truth of what happened to them was completely lost. Okay, so let's put all the pieces together. How does something like this happen?
How does a monster like Samuel Little stay invisible for so long? The final picture, it's really a perfect storm of systemic failure. It really boils down to these three key things. First, he chose victims from the margins, women he gambled the world wouldn't miss. Second, he never stayed in one place, which made it almost impossible for different police departments to see a pattern. And third, he operated for decades in a pre-DNA world, where the very science that finally caught him just didn't exist yet.
Samuel Little died in prison back in 2020. And while the FBI has managed to confirm over 60 of his 93 confessions, it's pretty much a guarantee he took the secrets of many, many more murders to the grave with him. So yeah, they caught him in the end. But his story, it just leaves you with this really unsettling question, doesn't it? This isn't just about one evil man. His entire reign of terror was only possible because he operated in a system and a society that overlooks the vulnerable. And that makes you wonder, whose lives are we overlooking right now?